ambassador for a couple of years now, and recently we've been working on a research paper. I'm also busy with my PhD at the moment in my fourth and final year, thankfully. So I've been working in research for a while now, but it's really nice to also be doing some bloodlines work in addition to that. So Bloodlines is a documentary that premiered in 2015 and blew the lid off of the canned hunting industry. The campaign was launched shortly after that to raise awareness about the commercial captive predator breeding industry and canned hunting and its links in South Africa. So if the audience is able to, just a quick virtual raise of hands, if anyone has actually seen the documentary or you're aware of what Bloodlines work is about, just to get an indication. That's a nice amount of hands. Fantastic. Great. That's really nice to see. So for those of you who are not aware of what the documentary is about, I'm actually going to stop sharing this screen and open up a new one.
You say you must not use the cameras.
You're not allowed to use the cameras?
Yeah.
My technique was to get on and off as quickly as I could.
I give you 2 minutes to leave my property. 2 minutes. You are from the Greenish. We know you.
But what is there to hide?
I'll kill you. I'll tell you. I warned you. Don't take the face off me.
I think South Africa is most probably one of the only places in the world where we breed lions commercially. And we breed them for hunting.
We're talking of 6,000 to 8,000 lions in captivity.
It's not against the law. It's extremely unethical and immoral and against the animal's welfare, but it's not against the law.
Breeding wild animals is no sin.
Part of the story, part of the narrative is brutality.
Every single day in South Africa, at least 2 to 3 captive-bred, hand-bred tame lions are being slaughtered in canned hunts.
I'm an animal lover, therefore I am a hunter.
It's not like we're mass murderers that just enjoy watching things die.
It's all about somebody going out there and having fun killing a lion.
I'm calling from the United States. I'd like to see about doing one of your lion hunts.
Murky world which is not open to scrutiny.
So I know that that's quite a difficult thing to watch. I know the visuals never cease to affect me, and very often I find myself getting quite emotional about watching that. So I know if you're seeing it for the first time, it tends to hit you quite hard. And that's one of the reasons why I think it's so important that we do watch these things, because a lot of what's happening in these visuals is happening outside of the public eye. And that's one of the reasons why this Bloodlines documentary is so important. So as Louis said, and as we mentioned earlier, I am a youth ambassador for Youth for Lions, which is a really great sub-campaign of Bloodlines. And really the aim of this is to be able to educate youth around the world about how tourist activities like cub petting, walking with lions, volunteering at these kinds of predator farms, all really enables and allows this industry to flourish and to be able to grow. So from around the late 1990s, the commercial captive predator breeding and keeping of lions in South Africa has been allowed to grow substantially. And as of 2019, there were around 366 facilities, and they held around 8,000 lions. This official figure, however, is likely to be an underestimation of the actual reality, and there could be in the region of 8, 10, or even 12,000 lions in captivity. Now, in comparison, what's really important to know about this is that in South Africa, we have around 3,000 lions in the wild. So that's a huge difference. Now, in addition to lions in these facilities, we also know that there are thousands of cheetahs, leopards, caracals, serval, and other exotics like tigers, jaguars, pumas, and even a crossbreed between a tiger and a lion called a liger. Nevertheless, what we can't say for sure is how many animals there actually are, because there has never been a full or official audit conducted on this industry. And in addition to that, due to constant breeding, slaughter of lions, and canned hunting, these numbers are in a continuous state of flux. Now, if we take a look at some of those figures there at the bottom, we'll see that of around 400 or so facilities, about 180 are open to the public, 200 are breeding facilities, 100 are hunting farms, and out of those, 10 are true sanctuaries. Now, later on in the presentation, I will be discussing a little bit about how to spot a true sanctuary. But if you compare those numbers, you realize that very, very few facilities here are actually for the animals' welfare, and majority of this is for commercial gain. So to be able to put this industry into perspective, there are an estimated 20,000 lions in the wild across 27 African countries. Now, this actually only represents about 8% of lions' historical range. In South Africa, we have around 3,000 of these lions in the wild, which can be found in places like the Kruger National Park, our other national parks, and some of our private game reserves. In contrast, we have anywhere between 8,000 and 12,000 lions bred in captivity. Now, they are bred purely for commercial gain and are used for a multitude of exploitative purposes, such as the cub petting industry, walking, canned hunting, and later we'll be looking at lion bone. So we can see that lions are used from birth until after their death for profit. So I would first like to be able to start with the beginning of this life cycle of a lion in captivity. Now, when lion cubs are born into captivity, they're removed from their mothers at a very, very young age, sometimes only within a few hours, but up to maybe about 10 days old, just as their eyes are starting to open. Now, this is done for two big reasons. The first of these reasons is that when cubs are removed from the lioness, she goes back into estrus. And going back into estrus means that she's ready to be able to breed again. Secondly, the cubs can then be passed off as orphans. And as orphans, they can then be raised by paying international tourists usually. And this also means that they become very tame very easily, and they're forced to rely on humans. One of the big problems with this is that lion cubs are very often fed cow's milk or milk replacements, which are usually designed actually for domestic animals like dogs. And the problem with this is that these milk replacements don't have the necessary amino acids lion cubs need in order to grow properly. As a result, we see lion cubs that are severely underdeveloped and they get sick very easily, just like that lion cub that we saw in the slideshow. Now, lion cubs and, well, lions in general actually are exploited for profit at every stage of their life. So once these cubs are taken away from their mothers, they're then introduced into the tourism sector, where they're able to essentially be photo props for selfies with tourists. And of course, international paying volunteers who come in to hand raise these cubs. As they grow older and they become too dangerous for cub petting, they usually will move into walking with lion activities. And all of this is really done under the guise of so-called conservation. And volunteers and visitors are falsely led to believe that these lions are going to be released as part of a conservation program. So once the cubs are around the age of about 4 weeks, they are introduced into the cub petting activities. Now, we've often seen that cub petting is extremely popular with lion and tiger cubs, but we also have seen instances where cheetahs and leopard cubs, are also used. Now, these cubs are petted often for about 8 to 10 hours per day, 7 days a week. And some of these facilities are even allowing up to 100 visitors per day in. There are serious welfare concerns associated with doing this to such young cubs. They have no contact with the lioness. Sometimes they have no contact with their own siblings. So all social interaction, which would normally be associated with the lion pride, is absent for these cubs. Also, at this age, we know that lions would typically be sleeping. They would pretty much be under a bush somewhere, sleeping as they would normally be. And in the case of a lion cub facility like this, they're forced to stay awake, they're forced to interact, and this overstimulation is incredibly stressful and affects their well-being and their health. Once they're a little bit older and they're too dangerous to be in cub petting situations, this is where they are often moved into walking with lions. Now, these sort of teenage-sized lions are trained to walk a very certain route and to do tricks like posing on trees or on rocks so that, again, they can be photo props for paying tourists. Now, the training techniques used to make lions do this is incredibly concerning. They're cruel, they're incredibly harmful, and really is akin to the way that circus lions are trained. So you've probably noticed, if you've seen photos of this or witnessed it happening, that tourists often have quite a big stick that they hold between themselves and the lions. And they're told that this is for their safety. Unfortunately, the reality is that this is very often not for their safety, and it's to ensure that there's a sense of dominance imposed on the lion because they associate that big stick with fearing the trainer and with fearing their training. So not only are these animals exploited for tourism activities, which are purely for visitors' entertainment, but they also then move into the captive or canned hunting industry. Now, canned hunting is different to wild hunting in that these lions are hand-raised and tamed, and they're released into a fenced-off enclosure where they are then shot and killed by a trophy hunter. The hunters often keep the lion's head and skin as trophies, but then they leave the skeletons behind. Now, leaving the skeletons behind is where the lion bone industry started. Mature lions, like the one you can see here in this picture, are often offered in these so-called canned or captive hunts, really a hunt that has absolutely no chance of a fair chase. Between 1999 and 2018, South Africa declared the export of almost 12,000 lion trophies. 80% of these 12,000 were from captive bred lions, and around 60% of these 12,000 trophies were destined entirely for the United States. Now, exports of lion trophies peaked in 2015, and then after that we saw a ban in the imports of trophies from captive bred lions to the USA. Now, as a result, we also have now seen that the lion bone trade has started up, and it's a relatively new revenue stream for breeders that started in around 2007. So lion bones have been used to supplement the tiger bone traditional medicines that we see in Southeast Asia. So as a result, hundreds of lions are now being bred specifically in captivity to be slaughtered for their bones to be exported to Southeast Asia. Initially, the lion bone trade was really just a byproduct of trophy hunting. But then research actually showed that around 91% of the skeletons being exported included the skull, which would have normally been taken away by trophy hunters. So this indicated that these facilities were existing purely to slaughter the lions and then send their bones to Southeast Asia for the bone trade. This was again confirmed by another study commissioned by the scientific authority, which found that about 1/3 of facilities keep lions to trade in their bones and other lion products only. Since about 2008, South Africa has exported 6,000 skeletons, weighing approximately 70 tons. And these have been exported to Southeast Asia for use in traditional medicine and luxury items like jewelry and ornaments. Since 2017, the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment set a legal annual quota to export 800 lion skeletons from the captive population. The problem with this quota is that it lacks any scientific basis and really is just driven by supply and demand. Under this quota, more than 2 lions are being killed every day purely for their bones to be exported and harvested. In 2019, a High Court judge, though, did rule that the setting of this lion bone quota was considered unlawful and constitutionally invalid, and that as a result, they needed to take into account the animal's welfare before any future quotas could be set. Now, no further quotas have been set since then, but there is still evidence showing that both lion and tiger bones continue to be harvested and exported from South Africa. Some of these with permits and others are happening illegally. Now, we have to ask ourselves why this is a problem for wild lion populations. Why is this a worry for conservation? So the lion bone trade really legitimizes the lion products among consumers and stimulates the demand for lion bones and other body parts, which is really acting as a substitute for tiger bones. And this in turn also compromises enforcement efforts. Further to that, we also see that this is incentivizing poachers to target wild lions, wild tigers, and other big cats to be able to launder their bones and other body parts that include things like their claws, their teeth, and their organs. Now, the reason this is also especially concerning is that around 98% of these exported lion skeletons are headed to Laos and to Vietnam, which are known hubs for illegal wildlife trafficking. And a lot of this includes rhino horn originating from South Africa. Now, of course, poaching seriously undermines lion conservation, and it also undermines any efforts to mitigate human-wildlife conflict. Scientists are also stressing that we really need to be careful because this has the potential to mirror the really devastating impact this has had on wild tiger populations due to a demand for tiger parts. Now, during lockdown recently, Blood Lions, together with the World Animal Protection, undertook a study about the health risks associated with the commercial breeding, keeping, and trading of lions. Blood Lions reviewed 150 scientific papers and identified a total of 63 pathogens that were recorded in both wild and captive populations. This includes pathogens that can be passed from lions to other animals, but also from lions to humans. Many of these pathogens raise concerns, therefore, for human health. And in particular, when we look at some of these facilities, hygiene protocols are sometimes absent, whether it's basic hand sanitization or even sanitizing the underneath of shoes while moving from one enclosure to the next. There has, of recent, been some good news, and things are beginning to change. In October 2019, a high-level panel was formed by Minister Barbara Creasy of the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment. And the goal of this was to review the policies, the legislation and practices on matters relating to elephant, lion, leopard, rhino, and their management, breeding, hunting, trade, and handling. This resulted in a nearly 600-page report, which was released in December 2020, and again later in May 2021. In this, Minister Barbara Creasy announced that South Africa would no longer breed and keep captive lions or use captive lions and their body parts commercially. This is definitely a massive step in the right direction, And we do hope that this will bring an end to the exploitation of our wildlife. But we do need to keep in mind that this is going to be a long process in order to phase out the industry. So we are hopeful for the future, but we are not quite there yet. Since this, a draft policy position paper on the conservation and ecologically sustainable use of elephant, lion, leopard, rhino was released for public comment in June last year. And we're now waiting for the finalization of that. Now, if we just take a look at what a policy position paper is, essentially it allows decision makers to deal with a problem, like in this case, the use of the wildlife. So here, clear objectives need to be set out with recommendations about how to reach those objectives effectively. Now, the policy position paper outlined here has been called a New Deal for People and Wildlife. And essentially, it aims to encourage the wildlife sector to become more responsible, sustainable, and inclusive in terms of tourism and wildlife management in South Africa. Now, one of the 5 objectives in this paper was to immediately stop the domestication and exploitation of lion and to close captive facilities. This then would mean that once the document is finalized, government can change legislation and bring the captive breeding of lions to an end for commercial purposes. What will be really great for us as South Africans is that if we're successful, South Africa will become a global leader and really a tourist destination for people who are seeking nature-based, responsible, ethical tourism. And of course, this will be a huge boost to our economy. I'm going to show you a short clip that Bloodlines produced for World Lion Day. And it's just really an illustration of what the future could look like once the phasing out of the industry has occurred. So now we have to start thinking about where do we go from here? Well, a good start was made when this draft policy position document was created and its recommendations were released for public comment last year, June. The department is currently in the process of preparing a draft white paper on conservation and the sustainable use of biological resources. And now we wait for this to be gazetted. The policy position document will then need to be finalized for publication, which will then go through a process of review of the legislation to ensure that the policy position can be translated into actual action. Further to that, there will need to be a development of a communication and stakeholder engagement plan to ensure that there is buy-in, participation, and support from other government departments before the phase out of the industry can actually commence. At this point, though, we have no time frame for how these steps will be carried out. So one of the big things we are continuously asked is what we can actually do to make a difference in the meantime and to make sure that this continues to be on the agenda and to make sure that it continues to be prioritized. As the public, whether as South Africans or international visitors to South Africa, we can all do a lot of work by educating ourselves. Just by knowing what the industry is about, by knowing what questions to ask owners and managers of these facilities, we can really get a better understanding of what we are supporting, what's ethical, and really what we're willing to actually see our wildlife going through. You know, if we know that facilities aren't acting in the best interests of the wildlife, people are going to be much less likely to support these kinds of places. So education, by all means, is one of the best things that we can do. In order to do that, we've also created a list of red flags to help the general public better understand what to look out for and what things should be in the front of our minds if we want to visit a wildlife destination or if we come across a facility that we feel we would like to visit. So the first red flag here is that if you can interact in any way with the predators, the cubs, the lions, anything like that, it is already a red flag. It is not in their best interests at all to be interacted with. Secondly, if the facility you're visiting always has cubs to play with, this is a big red flag. And if there are always baby predators present, but not that many adult predators at the facility. In fact, any amount of breeding of captive lions and other predators is a major red flag. The reason for this is that captive predators cannot play a role in conservation. They cannot be released. They will not be released into the wild. And the truth is their value is purely in their commercial output. So any breeding is not helping conservation or the animals. And lastly, if the tourism facility is trading in terms of buying or selling, then we also know that they're not a genuine sanctuary. So then that leads to the question, what really is a genuine sanctuary and what should we look out for if someone calls themselves a sanctuary? One of the best things here is to look out for anyone, like we said, who breeds, interacts, and trades, because a genuine sanctuary will do none of these things. So that's the kind of place you want to look out for if you do want to support a genuine sanctuary. And any animal that is in the care of a sanctuary will live there for the duration of their life. And those are the types of things you should be looking for if you are wanting to support a genuine sanctuary that is in it for the animal's welfare. Secondly, and I feel on this platform, I might also be preaching to the choir, because I'm sure many of you already enjoy wild places, but another thing that we can do is put our time, our money into genuine wild places where we know that these things are going back into the conservation of the land and into the conservation of the wildlife. And as South Africans, we know that there's no shortage of beautiful wild places that we can visit. And even going beyond South Africa into Southern Africa, Eastern Africa, we know that there are so many beautiful places where we can view these animals in the wild and genuinely contribute to their conservation. Thirdly, we can definitely spread the word on social media. We can chat about it amongst family and friends. I know I've spoken to a number of students in the past who said, I've been invited to a birthday at the Lion Park and I would like to go, but I'm not quite sure if I should support them. And just by having a conversation, they'll actually usually go back and say, you know what, I'm not keen anymore. I don't feel like I want to support this place. And they don't go. And it just helps to, start a conversation and start that kind of dialogue between teenagers and young adults that really helps them to decide, is this something I actually really want to do? The fourth thing you can do, of course, is watch the Bloodlines campaign or the Bloodlines film. Like I said earlier, it will be made available in the links where you can take a look at the website to see where you can watch it in full. And if you would like, there are also opportunities to support our campaigns online. You can become a youth ambassador. On the Youth for Lions website, you'll see that there's a number of resources that you can use if you're an educator as well. And of course, you can also host a screening or a fundraising event. And if this is something you would like to do, please make contact with us afterwards, and then we can help you and put you through the right channels to make that happen. So to start finalizing for the night, it would be great for everyone here to be able to follow us also on social media. This here is the Youth for Lions movement. Of course, you can also follow Blood Lions directly. And here are our socials and the website, and the links will also be provided in the chat as well. So next up, we have questions. I would like to suggest, because I got a number of questions online via email from someone who wasn't able to attend, if it's okay, I would like to maybe address some of those first. Otherwise, Rowan, I'm not sure if you think that there might be a better way.
You can start off with that. I'm going to give over the screen to Johan, and Johan, maybe Steph can start with those questions, and then we can go over to the live audience and the questions in the chat that Louise has not yet answered. Yes, thank you very much.
Stephanie, you're welcome to go ahead with those questions that you've already received by email, and then we take it from there. Hopefully that will also inspire more questions from the participants and everybody in tonight.
Yes, I thought it might stimulate a few more questions, or perhaps already answer some questions that are on people's minds as it is.
Go for it.
I have to be honest, I've written down the questions because it was a fairly lengthy email. So I've got my piece of paper here with me. So I'm just going to refer back to it, and then I'm going to answer each question individually so it doesn't feel too bulky and overwhelming. So the first question that was posed is, if we're already farming cattle and sheep and chickens and these types of things, why should we not be farming lions, right? So really, in a nutshell, we've been farming livestock for thousands of years, and we've domesticated them for thousands of years for the purpose of food production, primarily in the form of protein. Now, lions and other predators that are being farmed are wild animals. And currently, and in recent years, they're only being farmed for human entertainment, for canned hunting, traditional medicine, luxury items, and the live trade. So none of these farming purposes really contribute to the survival of humans. And in addition to that, there are still risks inherent in farming in terms of illnesses. And like we covered earlier, there are pathogens that can be passed from lions to humans, in the same way that we have also seen avian flu, swine flu, foot and mouth. So farming itself is not inherently a safe practice, and we have seen outbreaks of diseases there too. In addition to that, yes, farming is relatively regulated and a very strict and structured process. However, again, it's not necessarily completely free from its problems in terms of abuse and neglect, as I'm sure NSVCA inspectors would be able to attest to. So to just add lions and other wild animals into this ethically and morally, I don't feel like we can really say that that's justified. So that would be my response to the first question. The second question is the idea that by banning the industry, we would be forcing it to go underground. And this is a bit of a fallacy, really. The reason for that is that as it stands, the captive lion industry is legal and regulated on a national and a provincial level. But as we've seen from research, there's a terrible lack of capacity on a provincial level. And because we have the 9 provinces, each province has its own legislation. So this legislative divergence also means that there's no real ability to strictly and consistently regulate the industry. So what this means is that there's already an existing illegal element to the industry, which has been piggybacking on the legal trade. So once the trade in lions and their body parts is illegal, what is available on the market then is already considered to be illegal and can no longer be indistinguishable between what was a legal product versus an illegal one. And this will also help enforcement efforts. Then my third question was, wouldn't this protect predators and their gene pool? And no, essentially it wouldn't, because the captive industry is a commercial bubble, essentially, and it is by no means contributing to the conservation of these wild animals. They're not able to be released into the wild. They're certainly not going to be able to breed in the wild. And so their genetics and their purpose lies solely in their commercial value. There really wouldn't be any genetic benefit to having these animals sitting in captivity when we could rather be contributing to genuine conservation efforts in the wild. The next question related to their commercial value. Now, if we brought the industry down, we would then be taking away the commercial value, the revenue from tourism and these types of things. And this needs a little bit of unpacking. So the captive predator breeding industry in South Africa has been labeled as an economic opportunity. But a study by Van der Merwe in 2017 showed that the majority of lion breeders are typically in their 50s. They're Afrikaans-speaking white males. So what we're seeing is that the money from this industry is really accruing to a small group of relatively economically advantaged owners. They're coming from farming backgrounds, and they've really diversified into another sector of the industry. So it's not actually contributing to job creation or true transformation. We see this as well because in the study, they actually show that only around 549 jobs have been created across 4 provinces on these breeding farms. So it's not contributing in any major way to employment or transformation. Further to this, a lot of captive facilities have paying international visitors coming in. So they are paying thousands of dollars, pounds, and euros to come in, whereas this is then depriving local workers of any kind of employment. And so this is actually taking away full-time jobs from people. Also, if we take a look at a Harvey study, there was an investigation into specifically predator interactions and how much money this is bringing into South Africa from both domestic and international tourists. Now, in the study, he actually estimates that the gross revenue for predator interactions is only less than 1% of South Africa's total tourism contribution to the GDP in 2019. In comparison, though, it could actually end up costing South Africa more through damage to our reputation in terms of our tourism and our conservation sectors. And then I've got one more question here, which says, why not just let the industry continue and simply monitor it more strictly? So this is also quite a complex question that needs to be unpacked. And really, the big issue that we're seeing here is that the welfare mandate for captive wild animals straddles somewhere between the Department of the Environment and the Department of Agriculture. But the NSPCA is currently the sole authority who is mandated to protect the welfare of all animals. So we're talking about the NSPCA needing to monitor the welfare of domestic animals, livestock, and captive wild animals with no financial backing from the government. In addition to this, our animal protection legislation is really outdated. Our judicial system is not capable of handling these types of cases. And currently, we really just have no welfare norms and standards that can be applied to breeding, keeping, transporting, and slaughtering these animals. Strictly monitoring it at the moment is going to be incredibly difficult because there are no standards, and the capacity of individuals and departments to handle it is very, very difficult. So those are the questions that I wanted to address first, but it'd be lovely to hear from the audience now.
Johan, if I may, just before we start, Professor Liesel van Asch shared with me a link, and now it doesn't want to open, from Getaway magazine. That it's just with regards to what you said about the white paper on the conservation staff, is that on the 27th of June, the government has released the white paper draft on exactly what you were talking about for public comment. So there we go. Maret's just shared it, so everyone can see it. Some good news. So thank you for that. And then Johan, the screen is all yours.
Thanks, Ron. I just want to ask everybody's patience with the connectivity situation and the ESCOM situation. If we fall in and out, the rest of the team will sort of catch on, as we all are a bit tentatively hanging on to connectivity. Stephanie, thank you very much for a very, very comprehensive presentation on a very emotional issue and bringing in the facts into the issue as well. The chat has been extremely busy. Now I want to give people the opportunity to raise their hands. Please use the reaction tools at the bottom, and please go ahead and ask questions. Now's the time to participate verbally, and you're welcome to ask your questions. I see Marty, there you go. Thank you, Marty. I was wondering where you are. Go for it, please.
Yeah, thanks, Steph, for the talk. And I'm not wanting to sound more controversial than necessary, but I just, a lot of these facilities are already there and there's already lions in them. And if, for example, everyone stopped going to them tomorrow, those lions, although badly treated already, do not think that they would be much worse off if there was no income coming in, because I think it's that income, sure, it doesn't all get plowed straight into conservation per se, and it's for commercial gain. But if there's no income, those lions are going to really have a bad time. So in a way, I would almost say that the government or regulators or whatever the right boards or bodies are that should be looking at this should almost have a license per lion that these facilities should pay, and that money should go into further protection or into conservation. There's almost like a levy that they should pay, and then over time these things could be weaned off. But I think there's a lot of investment and capital that has been put into it. And I hear what you're saying in terms of the spread and who the owners and all that sort of thing, and you make a good point. But I think the numbers of people that you mentioned in terms of job creation of 500, if there's 300 and something facilities, I think is possibly not quite accurate. I mean, most places, I'm pretty sure, have at least 4 or 5 people that are busy working on those places, even if they've got a handful of lions. So, yeah, I don't know. I think in utopia, it would be great if these things weren't there, but the reality is that they are. And to get rid of them immediately, I don't think is a solution either, because the animals that are there are going to suffer even more, because without income, they aren't going to eat. So, yeah, I don't know.
In response to a number of the questions you have there, the study is by Ross Harvey, so you're welcome to go take a look at that. I'll see if I can actually pop a link into the chat for us so that you're able to take a look at those figures of employment. One of the reasons why it is so low in terms of local employment is that many of these facilities actually bring in paying volunteers. Yeah. So volunteers come to South Africa, pay to be here for 2 weeks, 3 weeks a month. And so they're actually doing the work. The other reason why it's also relatively low is because these are people who are working on existing farms, whether it be for livestock or for crops. So they might actually still be working in other elements of that farm, not necessarily just with the lions. And then to answer your question regarding, what would happen to lions tomorrow if we simply stop going, this is one of the reasons why the industry needs to be phased out. It has to be a process of phasing them out. And one of the first steps to that is to stop the breeding immediately so that we're not adding into those current numbers. And from there, those numbers will be phased out. I'm sure Louise would probably like to speak to that a little bit more, but that's one of the reasons why the phasing out is such an important element of this.
I mean, so if a facility decided guys, we're not doing the right thing. We want to come clean. We want to do, a positive thing. I mean, are there any facilities that have actually turned around? Because I mean, I know a couple of people that actually worked at the Lion Park or whatever the case is, and they were saying that it's not as bad as what is being made out. By no means is it great. So I think in the whole scheme of things, it needs to be improved. But I mean, if they're saying that they are trying to be better, I mean, from your guys' side, they wouldn't be allowed to breed any of the lions in the facility, which in essence would bring it to a stop. Then what would they do with that facility? I mean, I'm saying there's investment of capital that's already happened. So it possibly should have been outlawed from the beginning. Thanks.
Maybe I can jump in here as well, Steph, if you don't mind. Yeah, I think, Marty, I think it is a really good point. However, if we allow the breeding to continue, and that is where most of the money in tourism is made, it's actually with the cubs. We will never bring this industry to an end, because that will perpetuate the situation. More lion cubs means more lions to look after at a later stage in their lives. So I think we do have to sort of make sure that that breeding is being stopped, and that the generation of lions that we have in facilities now are the very last generation that we have to deal with. And then I think this is what we have been communicating to the government as well. I think it's very important that this process is not going to be rushed. So it could affect both people and animals in a very negative way. It needs to be planned really carefully. It needs to involve lots of different experts. It needs to involve money. Hopefully that we know that the government doesn't have any compensation, but really there should be compensation as well for people who are willing to stop this whole process and being part of this continuous vicious cycle. And I think that is where the government is battling at the moment. They're grappling with, yes, we've made this promise now, but how is quite a can of worms when you start looking at it. We cannot allow this industry to be stopped overnight. It's not going to happen. We're dealing with thousands of lions and other animals in that industry. We're dealing with people's livelihoods. So also you need to start working with people who are experts in change, business change. So we need to start looking at business models and change those, because there is a place for other types of wildlife tourism as well. True sanctuaries are part of that tourism cycle too. So I think there's lots of things that need to happen and that need to be looked at before this industry can really be closed. It needs to be done responsibly. It needs to be done well thought through, and we need to have lots of different experts in place.
I just want to let everybody is right. Rifumu, Emily, yes. Am I still there? Am I still connected?
Yes, you are. You broke away for a little bit, but you're still there.
Okay. Great stuff. The little group sitting there, starting with Light, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for this amazing platform and opportunity to ask a question. First of all, thanks to Stephanie for such a wonderful presentation. And my question will be, well, I'm from Wild Shorts Outreach. We teach conservation through photograph, taking young people from local communities for their first ever game drive in the communities. So my question will be, how can we, as Wild Shorts Outreach, teaching conservation in local communities, how can we well contribute or maybe assist in reducing these kind of issues that you're presenting about today of captivity of lions?
Thanks, Rufumo. That's a really good question. It's nice to see your faces again. You see everyone there in the background. So Rufumo, that's a fantastic question. And I think you must just keep doing what you're already doing. You know, through Wild Shots, you have been promoting the conservation of wild spaces and wild animals. And that's really important because you're really showing the people around you that wild animals are important and that there are ways to be able to access these places, and that you are providing the means of showing the communities around you, here are wild lions, here are the wild places that you can visit. And that's one of the things you're already doing so well. So I would say keep up already what you're doing because it's working. But really also one of the things you can do is use your photography to send out messages. You know, think carefully about how your photography can be used to tell stories. And that's one of the, in my opinion, one of the most important things you can continue to do.
And thank you. We really appreciate that you're here. Light shine. Please ask your question.
Thanks, Steph, and thanks, guys, for hosting this. So yeah, I just want to, it's not really a question, it's just more of an observation. So the industry, in terms of its continuation, some of the things that are happening to the industry actually are almost outside of South Africa's control. So in 2016, the IUCN actually passed a resolution not to support the cane lion practices in South Africa. And then countries like the US and the EU, they started banning products from the cane industry. So industry actually has started to decline since 2016, before even the government put the upcoming policies, the plans for the upcoming policies in place. So the global community, which is the biggest supporter for the industry, have kind of shunned away from it and stopped their people from coming to hunt the lions in South Africa. And therefore, the decline is, there's almost a natural decline in the industry without even, before government came to intervene. So that's one of the comments I wanted to point out. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for that.
Stephanie, would you like to comment on that, or Louise?
I think, Louise, I would love to hear your thoughts, but also, yes, I think there's a certain movement towards more ethical tourism, but of course, the lion bone trade is still continuing in that, because that's not necessarily going to be affected by tourism's perspective, or tourist perspectives rather, on ethical tourism. Louise, would you like to add to that too?
Yeah, I think every industry has got sort of changes and is reacting to outside changes. The change in law in the US really changed the focus of the industry to some extent, because we lost a lot of the American hunters. So that is absolutely true. However, as most industries do, they react, and they react by focusing somewhere else. So what happened? Fewer American trophy hunters come into South Africa to be part of the cane hunting industry. We now see other nations filling that gap. At the time, the industry started focusing more on the lion bone trades. Yeah, I think we now have to start looking at where is the industry going to focus in the next years. And I think one of the things that is happening also is more live trades, because there is no restrictions on live trades, and there's no real oversight in terms of what happens to those live animals once they've been exported on CITES permits. And don't forget, a lot of the animals are still being killed, and a large lion bone stockpiles are also being created that are not managed, that are not regulated. The government, the provincial authorities, nobody has any idea how large those stockpiles are. And there is an element of illegal trade still going on in terms of lion bone consignments that go out illegally as well. I hope that helps.
Thank you very much. Dr. Neil Wilson, welcome, and please ask your question.
Presentation. There are so many comments that I have about this presentation. The first thing, which is a fairly minor thing, but you mentioned a lion meta-population in Africa of 26 or 27,000. Stand to be corrected, but I think that's what you mentioned. That is a gross overestimate. The lion population in Africa is falling by the day. There are illegal hunting. There's illegal hunting going on around protected areas, Wanga, Kruger, the Kalahari transfrontier, involving trophy hunters who bait lions out of protected areas and kill them. There are iniquitous activities going on. Regarding the lion bone trade in South Africa and the lion farms, I really am very uncomfortable with the way some of the speakers here are aiding the government by perpetuating, with an argument to, we can't close it down. We can't close it down too soon. Yes, it cannot be closed down overnight, but it cannot carry on. It's an iniquitous industry. It involves criminal links. We've uncovered criminal links. We've uncovered criminal syndicates operating in South Africa's frontier towns, Kakamas, Uppington, you name them, all along the Molopo River. They cross over the Molopo River at night in their land cruisers. They target a cattle baron's farm in Botswana. They have the GPS coordinates. He calls them. They take out the pride of lion that's bothering him, and the bones, the pride gets buried. The bones get taken out either through C-130 Hercules, which land at these remote landing strips in the Southern Kalahari and the Central Kalahari, and smaller aircraft. They fly underneath the radar. They come in, turn off their transponders, come in, and they fly out, but they fly out with live cargo as well. Cheetah, for example. What's going on is absolutely evil. It's criminal, and nobody's doing anything about it. I reported this to Interpol in 2014. They did absolutely squat, nothing. I received a short message from Interpol saying, Dr. Wilson, your concern has been registered with Interpol, but you will not hear from us again. Well, I didn't hear from them again, and they did absolutely nothing because the iniquitous activities, criminal activities, are still carrying on to this day. We have informers in Botswana, in the South African frontier towns, who have infiltrated these syndicates and feed us information. The worrying thing is that the cubs are trafficked back to these lion farms, and they feed wild genes from these wild populations into the breeding farms, especially the ones that you mentioned in the beginning. There are a certain number of breeding farms. Well, those wild Kalahari lion cubs go straight to those breeding farms. And so there are a lot of very, very disturbing things that many people don't know about. And when I spoke to Ian Michler quite some time ago, and I mentioned this to him, and there was Lord Ashcroft as well, who hired special force operators to infiltrate the syndicates that are operating. So it's not new, but nobody's doing anything about it. I've appealed to so many international organizations to help and to come to the party because I cannot fund this on my own. What needs to be done is the syndicates need to be intercepted as they cross from the South African frontier towns into Botswana. They need to be intercepted and tried and charged and imprisoned with long sentences. They're criminals. They're absolute criminals. There's a big link between the criminal activities, whether it's prostitution, drug trafficking, human trafficking, and the lion.
Can I ask you, do you have a link that you can share in the chat where people can read more and perhaps connect with you on the issue? If you can put your email address there, or we can share that as well, so people can take this up with you afterwards.
Thanks, Johan. I think that would be very helpful to have that. And just to answer the first part of your question, it was around 20,000 lions as an estimation in Africa across 27 states.
But please share the information so people can get in touch with you, and so that Stephanie and Louise can also get in touch with you, and together we can take the issue further.
I can't agree with you more. I was just going to talk about, I mean, I'm not involved in the wildlife industry, but I'm very passionate about it. So I was going to talk about similar points to you, not going into the kind of detail you can go into. But the biggest issue I think that we face in Africa is the demand from China. So in any commercial industry, where there's a demand, it's going to flourish. So how we stop that, I don't know, because China is a superpower. And it's incredibly difficult. I know there's been a lot of work that's been done on this in the past. And the problem also is when you shut down these industries, they go underground. Because, I mean, look at South Africa. We've got so many criminals here. There's so much going on with corruption and fraud. And, I mean, nobody's been taken to book for... We sit in darkness every night while Zuma sits watching his TV with his generator, and he's the one who's caused everything in the country. So you're sitting with a government that's got that kind of a sort of, I don't know, way about them of hiding things. And the other thing that worries me is if you just look at human nature, what is human nature about? I mean, people are actually horrible people, mostly. And that's why we land up with the crime that we land up with. But then the other issue that came up was the welfare industry. The welfare industry is under so much pressure at the moment. They can't even cope with what they're doing. So how would we expect them to monitor this industry? And I do believe that the government has probably had many of these meetings and many of these points have been discussed. And I'm sure they've got a phase out plan or something to that effect. But what worries me is they shut down the industry and it does go underground. So as much as what I would love to believe that we could probably get a policy that comes out that does shut down the industry, I'm not too sure how it's going to work. Thank you. Steph, thank you very much for your presentation. That was fantastic.
Thank you, Tessa. I really appreciate that. And I appreciate your questions. You know, your concerns obviously are all centered around really massive systemic issues, which cannot be tackled by any one golden bullet. It would be lovely if it could, you know, and this is one of the reasons why I hear what you're saying, that a ban would, you know, cause it to go underground. But at the same time, by banning the industry or bringing it to an end, we would be able to then really be able to spot which products are illegal to help enforcement efforts, because right now there are both legal and illegal products and channels, and that becomes a very difficult thing to manage. So I'm not saying there's a great one solution, but by bringing it to an end, it does make it easier to enforce it. But you raise a number of issues that are all, you know, systemic and really deserve multiple levels of attention that one organization wouldn't necessarily be able to do on their own.
Can I add something there, Steph? I think we also need to realize that there wasn't a demand for lion bones. The demand has always been for tiger bones in terms of the TCM markets. That demand for lion bones has been created and a lot of the products are actually still sold under the pretense of it being tiger bones. So in a way, not all, but a lot of the consumers in China are being conned as well from that perspective. So I think that is something to keep in mind, that we're not talking about a product that has been part of the traditional medicine for a very long time. And I think, yes, there's always a risk that it goes further underground, but as Steph is saying as well, there is a part of this industry that is already trading and dealing in illegal activities. I'm not saying the whole industry, but there are parts of, and there's certainly illegal products, also from poaching of wild lions, and the wild lions is particularly focused on teeth and claws, for example, that are then being created into luxury jewelry items. In terms of the welfare issues, I totally agree. And again, as Steph is saying, it's a systemic issue. We're dealing here with an organization that doesn't get any financial support from the government, but needs to deal with all welfare issues in our country. It's just a ridiculous situation that cannot go on. So you have a private NGO that is mandated with the welfare of animals. I agree, something needs to be done, because they cannot cope on their own. They cannot cope with raising sufficient funds. There's lack of capacity, and then also there is a lack of judicial support as well. A lot of the court cases, or the cases, don't even make it to court, let alone that there are any prosecutions. So it's a big problem.
Thank you, Louise. Steph, I would just like to ask you just to shine a little bit of a light on possible solutions here. The young people that came in, can you talk a little bit? I know they are involved in a program where you are involved with conservation work. Could you say a little bit about them, please?
The director of Wild Shots is here in the audience, and if you would like, of course, I would be happy to turn over the floor to him. Otherwise, I can do a brief introduction.
By all means, please let's give him a chance to speak.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Loud and clear. Please go ahead.
Okay, so the organisation Wild Shots Outreach is based around trying to reconnect some of these black communities around the margins of the Kruger National Park in the first instance with their natural heritage. These young people live within 25, 30 kilometers of the park gates, and yet they've never been into the Kruger Park, let alone into any of the private nature reserves on the boundaries. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to reconnect them, and we're trying to share the wonders of nature and the conservation issues with them through this program. And Refumo is a prime example of what we're trying to achieve. He's a young man who's come through the program. He's now displaced me as a teacher in the program. I'm not doing much of the teaching anymore because Refumo's much better at it than I am, and he's a much better role model than I am. And we found that this program is boosting self-esteem, boosting self-confidence, and making these young people aware of the potential of the beauty and the economic potential that lies within the reserves and within the national park.
Oh, thank you, Mike. Really appreciate it. You're welcome to share a link to, if you have a website for the NGO, please share a link in the chat and people can support it there and find out more about it.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. I'll do that. Thank you.
Great.
Perhaps you could give a platform to Refumo on one of your webinars. It'd be lovely to hear Refumo talk about his story and a little bit more about the organization.
Not a bad idea. Thank you very much. I will follow up on that. definitely. I'm just looking to see if I saw another hand, but it disappeared. Seems like the question was withdrawn. Maret, am I missing any questions from the chat at the moment? Dorette, can you help me? Do I miss anything that has not been addressed? We've been busy for
I'll
quite a
quickly
while.
go through. Yeah, I'll go through it quickly and just check, but I don't think so. Dorette, if you can just assist, please.
I agree. I think most questions have been addressed in the chat, but if anybody has anything that they want to add, just put up your hand and then we can get to you as soon as possible.
Prof. Adam Inyang, it's lovely to see you. Please unmute.
Oh, thank you very much. Most appreciation to the presentation today. I have been trying to follow all the chats and I've made some comments. I'm happy to be in your midst. I see that this is a very hard presentation issue. We have to consider the fact that on the one hand, this illegal business of blood lions has been there and it's impacting the population in negative dimensions. Then the natural populations of lions are almost disappearing. People are poaching them even in protected areas. And then people are deliberately poisoning them. You find illegal grazers lace their dead animal with cyanide and other poisonous substances. The lions and other big cats that may feed on them, the whole population will die. And in such a short period of time, we are almost at the verge of losing everything that is, a predator in our natural habitats. And so I'm suggesting that as we go along searching for a sustainable solution, we need to feel the pulse of neighboring countries and other potential places that these illegal business people, if you close them down in South Africa, they may shift base and go to the neighboring country or somewhere else in Africa where they can do this business and still feed the Chinese and other Asian population that depend on these bones. That's my suggestion.
Fenyang is from Nigeria, where he's also an expert in the bushmeat trade. Steph, please go ahead.
So much for that comment. Yes, I can see where you're coming from, that by bringing it down here, it could pop up in other countries. Louise, I'm not sure if you'd like to add to that, but I still feel that it's going to become a matter of enforcement still to make sure that we're regulating the industry as strictly as possible to bring it to an end. And other countries will need to be able to also want to join that to make sure that it cannot explode in other places.
Yeah, I think there's always that risk, and it has already spilled over to other SADC countries. We know that it's, captive facilities are popping up in various places in Africa. Not so long ago, a captive facility, tourism facility opened in Tanzania. So yeah, it's happening anyway. However, we cannot use that as an argument, and I'm not sure, because I couldn't quite completely hear what you were saying, but it's not a reason for us to continue the industry in South Africa. I think we have allowed this industry to really mushroom and get out of control. And the government had chances to at least curb the industry, if not close it down, when it was fairly small. but they've allowed it to grow and grow. And now we're sitting with a massive big problem, and everybody's is grappling how we're going to deal with that. So that cannot be an argument for continuing this industry, because it will just get worse. So we need to come to a point where we say enough is enough, and we're going to find, collectively, we're going to find a way of phasing this industry out and making sure that we set an example how that can be done, and then other African countries can follow suit.
Thank you, Louise. Please go ahead and ask your question.
Hi guys, my name is
Welcome back.
Yes, I have a question. If it was possible for this program to be shut down, and then will they release the animals to the wild? And if that case, what are the chances that these animals will pass the diseases to the rest of the lions and their DNA, due to the fact that you mentioned in your slide that they are fed cow milk, and then they grow up weak and they contact some diseases?
Thanks, Light. So in essence, no, those animals will never be released into the wild. They cannot be released into the wild. They will not survive. They will not be able to hunt. So they will remain in captivity until the end of their lives, which is another reason why the phasing out needs to happen, because they cannot go anywhere else. So no releases into the wild at all.
Yeah, I think if I can add as well, there's a lot of animals in this industry that are hugely inbred. There's absolutely, as you say as well, potential diseases they carry that can be brought across to wild populations. We cannot obviously risk those kind of disease transmissions. And I think, to be totally honest, the larger wildlife spaces, they don't want these captive bred animals. The smaller reserves in South Africa, they can't take any more any more lions, because they're small reserves. They are really can only take maybe a handful of lions, and that's their tops to sustain on small fenced reserves. So there isn't actually, certainly in South Africa, no wild space where we could release them. We would then have to, even if we could overcome all these issues, we would then be looking at maybe translocating to other African countries, which is hugely expensive, and who's going to pay for the translocation of these animals in a responsible manner. We know, for example, quite a few releases have happened over the last few years of captive bred cheetahs, and we know that a very, very large percentage does not survive. And an even bigger percentage has no conservation success, because they don't actually breed and create offspring. So the successes with some of these relocations and releases of captive bred predators into wild spaces so far have not been very successful.
Thank you very much, Louise. Thank you for the question as well. That was a very good question. Light, you should, I'm not sure if you perhaps are studying already, but you should consider conservation. There's a comment from Mike in the chat. He's thanking everybody for the presentation. Maybe the proposed new legislation is what is required, but it will be toothless unless it is implemented by law enforcement, which currently is so weak, nothing will change. I have not seen the Bloodlines film. I will do so now that you have provided the link. Much appreciated. Enjoy the upcoming weekend. Thank you for your participation, Mike, and good luck with the NGO. May it go from strength to strength. Stephanie and Louise, thank you very much. I think we're going to say good night now. And thank you for your time. It's been a brilliant presentation.
Thank you very much,
Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Abe.
Thank you very much.